Welcome. As a part of AlumLab project, we are pleased to be hosting this session for alumni, postdocs, trainees, friends of our master's and PhD programs here at the Faculty of Medicine and Dentistry. First, let me start by acknowledging that the University of Alberta is located on Treaty 6 territory and respect the histories, languages, and culture of First Nation, Métis, Inuit, and all First People of Canada, whose presence continues to enrich our vibrant community. My name is Mariam Hejazi, and I'm a volunteer with AlumLab Project. I will be your host for this session. The AlumLab Project is a Faculty of Medicine and Dentistry initiative that creates space and provides programming for networking and connections. This session is a part of Career Incubator webinar series, one of the AlumLab programs. This series profiles different members of AlumLab Project as they discuss the nooks and crannies of their career paths. You'll be amazed at the diversity of places of our members have explored and the people they have met. There are other ways to be involved with AlumLab Project. The Coffee Break series offer members a chance to expand their personal network by meeting a few other members in a small group setting. For the time being, this will be held virtually over Zoom. Each coffee break session is hosted by an AlumLab member, typically a speaker from the Career Incubator webinar series. Additionally, you can connect at your own pace with other members through Switchboard, the UFA online career connection tool, or get involved in the mentorship program. The AlumLab website has more details on all these titled Mixing Beakers and Business, alumni stories of building successful startups. I'm excited to hear from our 4 speakers who have combined their passion for science with their entrepreneurial skills through the registration for this session. Feel free to submit further questions live using the Q&A box located at the bottom of your screen. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and will be available after the event for those who missed it live. I would now like to introduce our speaker. Matt Anderson Barron has a PhD in cell biology and is a co-founder of the startup Future Fields. Hilary Sweet and Matthew Nicol are co-founders of SN Biomedical. Hilary and Matthew met during their graduate studies and both have a PhD in material engineering and biomedical engineering. The panel will be moderated by Ashlyn Bernier, who is the Chief Operating Officer at SAM. Ashlyn holds both an MBA and PhD in biochemistry from the U of A. I now turn the stage to Ashlyn.
Hello, everyone. I think my fellow panelists can also turn their video on now. I will make one note before we started, and thank you to Miriam for getting us all set up. Someone did comment that the chat was disabled, and I did believe we wanted people to introduce themselves, the attendees on the chat. But with that, I'll get started, and then we can get the chat and the QA up and running as we go. So first, I want to thank the 3 panelists here for taking the time to join us at the AlumLab Career Incubator series this evening. And we did get short introductions, but to kick off, I wanted to hear a little bit more from each of them on their background and their current journey that they're on with their entrepreneurial venture. So why don't we start with you, Matthew Nicol. We have 2 Matthews, so I'm going to use full names tonight, and tell us a little bit about what you're working on, and maybe just briefly the journey or the transition from your PhD into what you're currently doing now.
Sure. So I did a undergrad in materials engineering, and then That's when I was at the U of A, and that's where I met an amazing guy named Rob Burrell, who is the chair of biomedical engineering there. And he had me fall in love with biomedical materials. So then I went to do a PhD with him. Rob had spent 20 or 30 years in industry before he came back to academia. And so it was taught from a very different vantage point. And it was kind of always, you always saw the industry side of things. And so I always had the idea of going into industry. So when I graduated around the same time as Hillary. Hillary, we worked for about 6 months, and then Hillary said, "Hey, Matt, you want to start a company?" And I said, "Sure, let's give it a shot." And so that's kind of how we got started in doing what we were doing. Did you want more details on what we're doing, or?
Sure. Why don't I leave that to Hillary to introduce the company that you're working on? Anything you have to add? Was it as simple as, hey, let's start a company, as Matthew said?
Yeah, I think it was, hey, let's start a company times probably 10. And then we both like hemmed and hawed about it a little bit. It wasn't quite as straightforward of a decision. We kind of had to gear ourselves up for it a little bit. But like Matt said, we did our PhDs together at the U of A. And just to familiarize everyone with my background, it was in mechanical engineering at Queen's University in Ontario. And so we had an amazing experience working with Dr. Burrell, and like Matt said, largely influenced where we are now. But the company that we actually started was focused on making simple and affordable, or is focused on making simple and affordable diagnostics. And I think that that's something that Rob, being an inventor of a product called Acticoat, which is a wound dressing that's used all over the world and sold by Smith & Nephew, was something that just really instilled Matt and I to, see the benefit that a product like that can have on the world and with people's lives. So we decided to start a company really looking to try and help people achieve a higher quality of care with diagnostics.
Wonderful, thank you. And Matthew Anderson-Barron of Future Fields fame, tell us a little bit more about your journey in the transition from academia.
Yeah, so I mean, my academic journey it started off very rocky, and my undergrad was pretty tumultuous, and I don't think we have time to go over everything, but I went through a lot of changes in terms of my career path very early on, in terms of what I wanted to do. I started in history of all things. So like I said, I was kind of all over the place. Ultimately ended up doing a bachelor's degree in chemistry and biology. Because like a lot of people in that program, I wanted to be a physician. And I didn't get in to med school when I first applied. So I decided to go to grad school, mainly as a means of bolstering my application. Because I'd done some undergraduate research work, so I was kind of enjoying that. And when I started my grad studies, I just kind of instantly fell in love with that, and decided that I probably wouldn't make a very good physician anyways, and decided to transition to a full PhD, and did my PhD in cell bio here at the U of A. And it was during my grad studies that actually we launched the company, because it's quite a while ago, actually, about 3 years. We came up on our third birthday for our incorporation date last week, actually. So a lot of that time, I was still a grad student. So when we launched the company, myself and my two co-founders, they had full-time jobs. I was still a grad student. So very early on, it was just, very, very small tasks here and there, just kind of figuring out what the hell do we do as a company. It wasn't until later on that we got more involved. But then ultimately, when I graduated from my PhD, I ended up doing a postdoc after that as well, because we still didn't have a means of working on this full time. And then about 9 months into my postdoc, I left that position to work on the company full time. But what we do, Future Fields, we make the most important ingredient for lab-grown meat, which is growth media. So lab-grown meat is this new industry, or where meat can be created in the lab without the need to raise an animal. And so the main input in that process is growth media. You need a lot of growth media to grow cells, and it's really cost prohibitive for this industry. So we developed a technology to reduce the cost of growth media, and now we provide that to all the companies that are working on the consumer products.
Wonderful. So you all make it sound like it was an easy transition, but I'm guessing there's a little bit more to it than that. So let's dig a little bit more into, like, did the opportunity come first? Was that because Matthew, Nicole, and Hillary, you guys had jobs? Like, you could have just stayed and had these stable jobs and continued collecting paychecks. So did you just see an opportunity you couldn't resist, or was it, I think we should start something and let's work to find out what that opportunity is, right? Because making that leap isn't easy, or I can't imagine it's easy to leave that and start something. So can you dig into that a little bit more, and what were all the different factors that you considered? And I'll let you two just kind of debate amongst yourselves.
I think, like, for me, it was like one of the major things you think, well, what do you got to lose? When you're a recent graduate, and I mean, so if you end up failing and you end up having to go back to work in 6 months to a year, it's not a big deal. Whereas if all of a sudden you have a family with kids and you got to support everything, it makes it a lot harder. I don't know. What would you say, Hillary?
Yeah, I remember Matt and I having a conversation about, we don't have any experience and we don't know what we're doing. And I remember us kind of talking through that, kind of like what Matt just mentioned. Why not now? Because you think you don't know enough, but are you ever going to be at the point where you really feel like you know exactly what to do? No, probably not. And I do remember us having that conversation about, we don't have families, we can afford to not pay ourselves for a year and commit to just going out there. And we definitely are falling in the category of the latter of what Ashlyn was talking about. We didn't know what product we knew generally we wanted to try and make a diagnostic, but we didn't know what problem we were going to solve. So we
even at the beginning, we didn't even know that, right? Because we started out, like, the reason we picked SM Biomedical and not Diagnostics R Us or something was because we knew we wanted to help people, and we didn't even know how yet.
Yeah, and how did you figure that out? What was the journey to figuring out what was the problem? And did you put any parameters, like, okay, we're going to give it a go for 6 months, and if we haven't landed on the unique gap that we think we can fill by then, what was the process?
I think it was a year, right? We said we'll give this a year, and if it's not working out, we'll
go back to your day jobs.
We really just we actually started going to conferences in the veterinary space, and there was a few that had lined up really well. Like, it was a few months after we had decided to start the company. We'd figured out, what's our mission and vision going to be? What do we want to achieve? And then we just started going to these vet conferences, and everyone was super helpful, would be more than happy to talk to us about, what problems they had. And we just would generally, like, people would look at us and be like, you're engineering students? Like, you just got your PhDs? You're at a vet conference learning about, like, a large animal seminar, or, viruses in livestock. And but it was actually a lot of fun. We talked to so many people, and we just went about it asking everyone what their problems were and what they wish they had and what products they hate using and what they really like using. And so that's kind of how we narrowed it down to, okay, we have these 10 problems. Which one can we solve, and which one should we try to solve with a product?
And I think one part that we should probably add in that was really key was we had amazing mentorship from Rob Burrell during that whole time. So, like, even when we went out to try and start our own company and we were looking for problems and stuff, Rob was the guy that said, Well, veterinary industry has probably got lower regulatory, so maybe you want to aim there, right?
I was going to ask what pointed you in that direction, but
yeah, well, lower. If you think, how are you going to start up a company to do diagnostics unless you have a ton of cash flow? Well, I got to pick somewhere that's got a low cost to market, right?
Well, we'll get into the money question in a moment. I want to ask Matthew Anderson-Barron the same question because your journey seemed to be very different from Hillary's and Matthew's around you kind of wound down the academic stuff as the company wound up. I also want to encourage participants I don't see any Q&A coming in yet, so don't be afraid to submit questions. We carve out time at the end, but Matt Anderson-Barron, can you tell us a little bit about your journey and how you kind of struck that balance along the way and what led you to eventually take the leap full-time into your venture?
Yeah. So I think my journey was definitely different. As I said, we started the company quite a while ago. So there was a very long time where we were, working on this part-time, just really bootstrapping whatever we could. There was, things we could do, but, we were pretty limited in our capabilities. And I think one of the differences too is like we knew kind of the problem we were trying to solve. It was just how the hell do we solve it when we don't have a place to work, we don't have money to buy reagents, buy lab equipment. So it was kind of tough. I had a lot of support from my supervisor at the time, Andrew Simmons. He knew of my interest in this field, and he was kind of letting me tinker a little bit, in the lab evenings and weekends, just kind of try some things out. So I was, fortunate to do some of that stuff. But yeah, I couldn't have taken the leap to it without, some cash to do it because, I guess I just didn't have I couldn't have done it without taking a salary. We had I had a baby on the way. So it's like, I don't know how my wife, who was a co-founder as well, would have felt about that. So my leap to full-time took a little bit longer. Like I said, it was about 2 years, and that's part of the reason I decided to do a postdoc after my grad studies as well. But the intention was always to work towards being in this company full-time, and that being my full-time job. So there was a lot of like I said, a lot of bootstrapping and just doing anything we could in our spare time. Obviously that's a very slow way to make any progress. So I didn't make the leap until we got into an accelerator program, and with that came a small investment. And so we took that money and we were able, myself and my one other co-founder, were able to start working on it full time. And similar to what Hillary said, I think like it never really ever feels like it's going to be the right time, or it's not always an easy decision. Even then, like when we had a little bit of money to pay ourselves, we still felt like it was really risky. Like we had about 7 or 8 months of runway when we started. So it's like, okay, well, we got to make some significant progress in that time span, or we're going to run out of cash, and then we're dead in the water. So yeah, it never really feels like it's the right decision. It's always a little bit scary, but yeah, we took a little bit longer to get to the point where we were ready to commit full time to this. And
congratulations to Matthew Anderson-Barron and his team, who raised a nice little seed round. The announcement went out last week, I believe. So hard work and risk and sacrifice do pay off. So a big congratulations to you and your team on that. Let's dig a little bit more into this question of money. Where does the money come from? Because I feel like for a lot of entrepreneurial students who are really interested in going down this path, that becomes such a mental barrier. So Matthew, you just mentioned that you got into an accelerator. What are other sources of early cash? I know, personal savings is one. Matthew, Nickel, and Hillary, I don't know if you had different experiences where that first little nugget of cash that can come, especially you're both in capital intensive markets where you can't just have a laptop and create something and have people pay for it. There are materials that you need to purchase. So maybe we'll go back to Matthew and Hillary to kick this off. But how do you get the the cash going, and what's the chicken and egg issue of cash and product? How do you solve that?
You want to take that, Hillary?
Sure. So we actually were able to do a little bit of consulting work within the kind of first month or two of starting the company. And so that gave us, I think it was 10K, which isn't a whole lot, but I think Matthew and I are both pretty cheap people. So we were able to make that go a fairly long time, with especially with us being able to not pay ourselves right off the start. And I think that, I mean, we also were able to buy some equipment used from auctions. We were able to have Matt's family donate a corner of a garage for us to use. So we tried to keep things as inexpensive as we could, knowing that we needed to go out and find our problem, let alone build an MVP or some sort of prototype that we could then use to either raise more money, or our hope was to just be able to start selling to generate some cash flow. But another good, as you kind of get a better sense of what your problem is and what you're going to do to solve it, there is a lot of really good grant opportunities in Alberta. So we've been able to get a few Alberta Innovates grants, micro voucher and voucher. And so that allows you to kind of pay service providers, whether it's like working towards getting a patent or working on accounting, like any service provider could be consulting. And so we've been able to really make use of that money. And then we also actually got GreenSTEM funding through the University of Alberta. So there's all these opportunities for grant funding, and it is kind of hard because you have to have something to show, or to demonstrate that you've done a little bit of work before you can typically get that funding. So you do kind of have to either really bootstrap and just do as much as you can before you make any money or apply for these grants. But once you kind of get the ball, everyone kind of said to us, once you start getting grants, they'll just keep rolling in. And there really is some truth to that. Once you get a little bit of money, you can do a little bit more, and then the next grant you apply for, you have a bit more to show. And it's really, we've been fortunate to be able to get some of that funding to help us move along.
And at what point did funds start coming in from either customers or investors, and what came first? And what can you tell us a little bit about what getting to that point was like?
Sure. So what would be the best way to tell that? So what we did is we went out, we interviewed a whole bunch of vets, we got a whole list of big problems, and then the one problem that we came across was cats all die from kidney disease. Currently, the tests that they do for that is quite expensive, and that if we could do it with a very inexpensive, simple, like a salivary test, it's kind of like, I call it a hot tub test strip for your cat's kidneys. We thought that we basically went out, said, okay, here's the problem. The problem is the annual cost of the testing is too much. We would make a presentation, show that to each of the vets, and then the vets would give us feedback and say, yeah, your solution works, that looks great. That's the whole, what you call a customer discovery or customer validation process.
I believe there's a book
so we
that,
did.
That you relied on heavily to teach you through this process.
Yeah, so the number one book I would recommend is Startup Manual by Steve Blank. You basically just follow that thing all the way through. So then where does this go to funding? How does this get the funding? Well, once we had basically customers saying, yes, we would buy that if you could make it, then we tried to make little miniature prototypes. And then once we had enough like little miniature prototypes to say, okay, yeah, we can prove that we can do it, then we went out and we got a friends and family funding round.
Gotcha. No, it's
so you needed that. You needed to show the problem plus the solution that you had. And if you could demonstrate that, then it created the validity in actually getting funding for it, right?
Well, do you know what that sounds like? It sounds like just a different way of applying a scientific method to a different type of problem, right? Which I think is something I've realized, being in the startup land, is so much of it is just applying a scientific way of thinking to just a different type of problem, right? You have a hypothesis about a problem that exists and you want to conduct some experiments, and then do it over and over and over and over again. So I'm hearing some interesting themes emerge about kind of the approach you take to problem solving, and figuring out what the steps are when you can make certain decision points that you might hit where you're committing yourself full time. So I'm wondering if we can transition to talking a little bit about sort of what skills you bring from your academic backgrounds into this that you find are serving you well in an entrepreneurial journey, and where you might have had to learn new things or bring in outside help because there were skill sets that you didn't have. So Matthew Anderson Barron, why don't we start with you on that one?
Sure. Yeah. In terms of skills, besides like, the obvious, which is like the technical stuff that you end up applying to whatever technology development that you're doing within the company. For me, I think the biggest thing was just networking and talking to people. As much as you end up sometimes being a lab rat in school and just kind of like, hiding away a lot in the lab, going to conferences and things like that, doing presentations are really important for running a company. Things like, we used to have to do like our departmental seminars. So we would have to, get up and present, or, your thesis defense. Thesis defense is just like pitching to investors. It's the same thing. The only difference is instead of selling your data, you're selling your company or your technology. So I think so much of that carried over into running a company, particularly on the pitching part. I think I'm an encyclopedia of mistakes for when it comes to fundraising. Like we went through so many problems at the start, like just challenges at the start. But yeah, I think like networking, the ability to present and sell your ideas is such a big thing that I got out of grad school, that I think really carried over into entrepreneurship. Besides, like I said, besides the obvious things like the skills for technology development.
Matthew, Hillary, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think for me, I did, because my background was mechanical engineering. In my academic PhD setting, I really learned like, how do you set up experiments? How do you design experiments? And I think because our supervisor was a little bit unique, we just got questioned all the time. Why are you doing that? Think like really forced to think about it. And so I think that's a skill that Matthew and I are both able to bring to the company is, okay, let's just stop for a second. Why are we doing this? Should we do it this way, or should we do it a different way? Maybe there's a better. And so I think that's something that we've both been able to kind of bring over into the company side from the academic setting. And then in terms of new skills, there's just so many aspects of, from budgeting to, finding out when your company is going to run out of money, where are you going to spend that money, like allocating your budget. A lot of the business development and the business aspects were new for me. Matthew grew up a little bit more in a business setting with some of his family members. But for me, there was just so many aspects of that were new. And every day, like there's always like, there's grant writing, there's trying to bring on employees. There's just every week there's something new that you're trying to go out and do. So just an endless number of skills that you're going to need to learn as you go. But I think that's normal.
Matthew, anything to add there? Matthew
Uh,
Nickel?
The question was carrying, what skills do you learn in university that you could carry over, right?
And what new things have you found you've had to learn?
Carried over, learning really complex things, really hard, complex things. You have to do that in university. And that makes doing the startup a lot easier because, like Hillary said, you're having to learn new stuff all the time. So if you've already had the training in how to do that, it helps so much. And then what new things have I learned? I mean, what new things haven't I learned? I think working as a team was huge, especially when we were cash tight, like really cash tight. There was some ups and downs, and sometimes you thought, geez, is this company even going to go forward? But I mean, you really learn how to come together as a team and move on and move forward with that.
Super interesting.
That's probably another thing.
I'll just add to that.
Yeah.
We were fortunate that usually my downs and Matt's ups aligned. So it worked out very nicely for us to kind of bring each other back to, no, it's going to be okay. We can just one more month.
One's saying I want to quit, and the other one's like, I can keep going.
I think I've seen I can't remember where it was. I think it might have been Sam from Jobber talking about that, how with your co-founders, it's really important for the trough of sorrow to be, a little bit off from your co-founder, because if you're both there at the same time, you're never going to make it. So yeah, that's interesting. I realized I missed the second part of the question. So I'll just add, in terms of things that I've had to learn, the biggest thing for me has been managing people. Grad school, I was in a lab, but my project was my own, and I worked by myself all the time. And now all of a sudden, we have a team of people doing the work, and I don't even touch a pipette anymore. So it's now all I do is manage people. And that was a very new thing for me that I had to learn, on the fly. I mean, I'm still learning it, right? Like, I'm not by no means a great manager at this point, but yeah, that was the biggest difference, I think, and something that I had to learn very quickly.
Wonderful. So I think we're touching a little bit on, it's really hard and there's lots to learn and it's risky and tough to make that transition. But I'm wondering if you were sort of pitching out to the audience but this is why it's all worth it. And this is why it's so great. And if you enjoy these sorts of things, you will love building your new venture. Like, what would your pitch be? What do you really, really love? And why is all of that risk and headache ultimately worth it in the end? Matthew Anderson Barron, why don't we go back to you to kick that one off? Tough question, man. I know.
There's not a single day I don't enjoy going to work. I love every minute of it. I think when you find like a mission that you're really passionate about, and the technology is something you enjoy, and the team is great. Like, I think that's all what I have right now. And like I said, I love going into work every day. I haven't taken a day off in like 18 months, and that's because I love what I do. Yeah, I mean, I know people always say, like, you find a job you love and you'll never work a day in your life. And I feel like that's really, really true for me. So yeah, I think it's like, if it's something you're really passionate about, it doesn't matter how hard it is, or how much time you spend on it. And, if you're working 60, 70 hours a week, it doesn't feel like work. Like, most nights, most evenings I'm working, after my daughter goes to sleep, and it's like, doesn't feel like work,
Can I follow up on that one, Matt? Your experience in academia, how would you contrast that? Like, not to say you were unhappy, I don't want to make any assumptions, but how does that feeling contrast with how you felt going through grad school and a postdoc?
Yeah, I mean, my grad school experience might have been unique in that I didn't I don't think I did a lot of the like, 16-hour days, like really long work weeks. Like I treated it very much like a 9 to 5. I worked, 40, maybe 45 hours a week in my grad studies. And so maybe that's unique. I don't know. I enjoyed the technical aspect of my grad studies a lot, but I didn't feel passionate about necessarily like the project or anything like that. Like it wasn't something that I went to bed every night thinking about and woke up every morning thinking about. It was fun. Like I said, I enjoyed the scientific part of it, but it wasn't like a mission that I was really passionate about. And I think that's the difference. Like I remember the moment I found out about this industry, cellular agriculture, and it was like, that was a very pivotal moment for me. I knew that like that was exactly what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. Like it just like really aligned with my core. And so it's just like, if you find something like that you're really passionate about, it makes a big difference.
Amazing. Hillary, what about you? What do you love about your job, and how does it contrast with your experience in academia?
Yeah, so I guess for me, I never intended to do a graduate degree. So I didn't really know what I was getting into. I lucked out with my supervisor. And I think largely because of him, I was able to actually complete it. I think if I had your, standard academic prof, I don't know that I could have made it through because it was just all so new to me. I typically enjoyed like the social aspect and kind of what's been previously mentioned. You're a little bit isolated. So I found it quite challenging at times, but because I was actually working on a project in my PhD that was focused on point of care diagnostics and applications that would, you could actually see where my work would be down the road if it was successful. I think that was also super helpful for me. So I would completely agree with what Matt Anderson Barron said about if you're passionate about it, it makes such a big difference because you're so much more invested in what you're working on. And so I think for me, both on the academic side and now on the company side, that's something that it's just been like the passion has always been there for trying to help people and trying to make something that's, like a new tool and a new diagnostic product is just been something that I just get up, like I'm excited, like Matt said, to go to work every day. I'm excited to get like one step closer. And so I think that my like advice for people would be if you find something that you're passionate about, then that's going to make a world of difference. And I think you'll be 10 times, like have 10 times more energy and more like to put towards actually achieving that. And finding things that you aren't passionate about can be part of that process, but not kind of limiting yourself to thinking, oh, I started this and now I need to stick with it, because it's a lot more fun if you're enjoying what you're doing.
Oh, absolutely. I'll change the question up a little bit for you, Matthew Nickel. We've heard from all three of you now, I think, tonight about how you're very supportive supervisors, and that's unfortunately not the case for everyone. That they have, that sounds like the entrepreneurial mindset from Dr. Burrell was really fostered. And just that ability to try new things and find what you're passionate about. So what about students who might not have that mentorship or that approach by their supervisor? How can they still find room to discover what passions might lie outside of the academic path for them? What advice would you have? I'll start with you, Matthew, but feel free to chime in to Hillary and Matthew as well.
That is a tough question. I think the best advice that I could give is find a mentor who will. Because I guarantee you, I wouldn't have done it without the mentorship. So if you don't have it, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. but then go out and find it, because there are lots of people out there that want to help and are really wanting to help mentor and see people that are ambitious and have a passion about something and want to see them grow. So that's the best answer that I could come up with that.
Any ideas from all three of you on what that could look like and where someone could find a mentor? Is it just through networking? Are there other programs that you're aware of that, you know, someone who might not necessarily have the idea yet but wants to explore can participate in to learn a little bit more about what journey they could set out on?
Yeah, there's a lot of resources out there. I was not aware of them at all. I mean, I wasn't looking, but you know, there's the VMS service at the U of A. You know, we were part of the U Alberta Health Accelerator. We still are, and so through that we get mentorship from, you know, incredible mentor Sandra Spencer, and yeah, there's tons out there. You kind of got to look for it. You know, I put a plug in for Startup TNT. You go there. I mean, when we were doing it in person, you go there and you just have beers with people. You're going to meet someone who's going to, you know, you ask around. You're going to find someone who's going to be willing to help you. There's so many. You just got to look for it. We were really lucky. I'd say the most influential person at the start. We were really lucky. When we were pitching to VCs, we ended up meeting a guy. He runs a firm out of California. His name is Michael Dean, but he launched this accelerator program and invited us to apply. And that was like, if we wouldn't have gone into that accelerator program, we'd be done by now. Like, that was huge. So I would certainly say one of the best things you can do is look at accelerator programs, especially there's tons that will take on really early stage companies. You know, a little bit more risky, and a lot of them do come with investment too. So through that, like we got connected with you know, a really great group of mentors, Michael being one of them. And so yeah, there's lots out there. You just got to look for it. You got to put yourself out there. But yeah, I think accelerator programs are probably the best thing you can do. Just find some, look around, apply. It's really, really impactful for early stage deep technology companies.
And networking begets networking. You just kind of have to start, and you'll meet one person who will connect you to two more, who will connect you to two more. Hillary, Matthew, Nickel, anything to add to that? Programs or events, organizations that you've found really helpful to help get that additional mentorship?
One thing that comes to mind that's I think pretty relevant for probably this group is Startup Edmonton. There is, I think it's a 1 day, like usually on a weekend, but a 1 day, few hour course that's kind of an intro to what a business model canvas is. So if you're looking to try to, you know, plan out an idea and really think it through, I had done that, and then there's actually a pre-flight 1, 2, and 3 that you can sign up for, and Matt, Nickel, and I both did that program, and that was really helpful. It was definitely like we were doing those courses before we had narrowed down what exactly our product was, but you kind of pick an idea and go with it, and they have great employees or great mentors there as well that are more than happy to sit down and talk through ideas or, you know, give guidance, and lots of different Slack channels that there's always conversations on. So I think that would be a good resource for people interested in getting into a startup or starting their own to get involved in that network.
Absolutely.
I would add something. This might be a little outside the box. I don't know. When we started talking about looking at veterinary diagnostics, Rob Burrell had said, well, you know, you should talk to this guy, Merle Olson, who works down in Calgary, and he does pharmaceutical stuff. So we just had a name from him. Got his phone number. We called him. We went down and met him, and basically just outright asked him, you know, we want a mentor to help us through that. Are you open to that? So that's kind of like my outside, because I've been super lucky just with the people that just happen to come into my life. I'm like, holy crap, look at these mentors. But if you're trying to find someone and you're stuck in a place where you don't have the mentor that you're looking for, just go out and ask, right?
No,
I don't know,
absolutely.
right?
No, I think why be sneaky about it, right? And if the answer is no, then you can stop wasting your time and find someone else, right? But I really like that, Matthew. I think just go for it. Ask around. Someone somewhere will connect you to someone who will be really excited about what you're building and will want to help. So I think that's great. Last call to get questions in to the Q&A. We'll shift over in a minute or two there. Maybe last thing that we can dig into before that is, you know, it's one thing to start a company, and, you know, the three of you are examples of having done that and finding some success. But what if you want to potentially join a startup? So you're all at the point where you're starting to build out your teams and hire and bring on some talent, potentially from similar programs that you've been through. So can you talk a little bit about what you're looking for in a team member? We'll start with you, Matthew Anderson-Barron, on that one.
Yeah, we've revamped our hiring process a lot in the last few weeks, actually. I mean, for us, like, obviously there's a need for the requisite core competencies for that position, right? Like, being a technology company, you know, you need a specific person who has experience with, you know, particular techniques. So there is that, but you know, a lot of the times those are a dime a dozen. Like, it's easy to find biologists who have done Western blots, right? So that's not challenging. When you're joining a startup, especially a small team, it's so much about the team culture, and it's so important to pick people who, you know, for lack of a better term, just aren't assholes and are going to work well with the other team members. I think we've put a heavy emphasis on that since day one, and I think that's one of the best things we've ever done as a company, and really what has contributed a lot to the little bit of success that we've had is picking really, really good people for our team. We've been really lucky. Everyone on our team, they work so well together. Everyone really gets along, and yeah, like I said, when you're a small team, that stuff matters so much. It's not like when you're a 500 employee company where, you know, you're not going to know everyone, obviously, but when you're 10, 15 people, you really get to know these people, and you need to be able to work with them intimately. So yeah, it's just, and I know that's like, it's hard for people, like, oh, how do you know, fit company culture, right? So I guess that's maybe not great advice, but I would just say from our side, as someone who would be hiring someone, that's really what we look for, is an emphasis on how they're going to fit with the team.
It was Herb Kelleher, who is the CEO of Southwest Airlines, that said, you hire for attitude, not for skills. You can teach skills.
Yeah, exactly.
What would you say? Oh, sorry, go ahead, Hillary.
I was just going to say, with our company, we've only had one employee that we currently have. So I actually was curious to hear from Matt Anderson-Barron, like, what's one piece of, how do you try to hire for a good culture fit? Because that's all something that I think Matt and I are also trying to, you know, build a company that we want to go to work every day. We don't want to be going to work and, you know, have someone that we're working with that we have to micromanage or, you know, doesn't get along. So what's your advice on how to do that?
Yeah, a lot of interviews. I think CV, when I'm screening CVs, I spend 30 to 40 seconds on them per CV. I just, you know, number one, don't have the time to read everyone's in depth. I spend more time on a cover letter than a CV. I'll just like look at the CV, look degrees, that sort of thing. And then we do like 3 to 5 rounds of interviews for an employee. Like, first is very just a casual conversation. Then we'll set up another one where it's a bit more technical, where we can kind of find how they think. Then we do more of the soft skills. and then we have them actually do not so much an interview, but more of a conversation with other team members. So not the hiring people, but other members of the team. And then sometimes we'll do one more. So really it's just spending time, invest the time to get to know the candidates before you make a decision. Hiring is a very time intensive process. Be prepared to spend a lot of time doing it. But yeah, there's is it hire slow? No, fire fast, hire slow, right? So you want to really invest the time to pick the right people.
I'll add something in here as well, and hopefully it'll be helpful to the panelists, but also any members of the audience who are looking. We've probably hired 30 people over the last few years, and one trick that we've learned that works really well is we require a detailed cover letter and as many hoops as we can put in that people have to jump through before they're even to the point of an interview. We call it like we're measuring the give a shit factor, because if they don't read the job posting enough to see that a cover letter is required, if they don't put the work in to do a good cover letter, and if they don't do like the screening things that Indeed puts them through, I don't care how good their qualifications are, they don't care enough and they're not going to be a fit for our culture. So figuring out little tricks like that has saved us a lot of time to qualify candidates from the start before we spend the time of our entire team doing interviews and that sort of thing. So I'm going to shift over to picking a few questions from the Q&A. So thank you to the audience members who've put some questions in here. Someone had a really specific question, but it's a really interesting one around like sales and marketing and advertising. And, at some point you have to, if you want to sell your product, you have to do all of that sort of stuff. But coming from scientific, technical backgrounds, that's not a hard skill, even though you might, as Matthew Anderson Barron mentioned, you know how to pitch and you can speak, but sales and marketing, those are technical fields, just a different kind of technical field. So did you have to tackle that to start? Did you bring people in? Did you work with consultants? What resources did you use to achieve that before you could necessarily go out and hire senior talent? So Matt Anderson Barron, why don't we start with you on this one?
Yeah, sure. Ours is a little bit easier because we're a B2B company, so we're not dealing with like consumer facing products. And our industry is pretty small. There's 50 to 60 companies in this space, and it's pretty new. So it's easy to just find people on LinkedIn or reach out on their website. So all of our marketing, I'd say, is just customer conversations. So when we want to, work with a new company, we, connect with them on LinkedIn or something, find, one of the founders, message them, set up a time to chat. And so it's just a lot of meetings with customers, potential customers. But we got really lucky because I'm bad at it. And I think my other co-founders aren't very good at it. Our first hire, Chris Federley, some people might know him because he came from the U of A system. I don't know how that guy learned how to sell stuff because he's never done it before, but my God, he has such a way with the way he speaks to customers. I've been on calls with him. I'm like, oh my God, he's so good at this. And so we got really lucky because we ended up with him as a first hire. And I don't think it was clear that he was going to end up in that role, but now he's our business development guy. And so he handles all that now. So I don't have to worry about it. And he's really, really good at it. So maybe that's not a great answer, but yeah, I'd say we just got really lucky at ending up with someone who could do it really well.
Wonderful. Matthew, Hillary, anything to add there?
I don't know if we can give any good answers to that yet. We're in the middle of that, right?
Yeah, getting to that point.
Yeah, one interesting thing that you said there, Matthew Anderson Barron, was Chris didn't start in that role. And I think that is something really interesting and unique about startups. And it's both a challenge and an opportunity, is whether you're a co-founder or an early employee, you're going to move around. And once, you figure out not only where the business is going and the needs of the business, but the skills, even just the inherent skills and natural abilities that people have, you you really, have to be okay with moving around and things shifting. And, whenever we're working with members of our team and things are moving, it's just kind of like, this is the chaos of startup. And you have to be okay with that. So I'm wondering if each of you can speak a little bit to that, of the uncertainty and the chaos, because that's not for everyone. And I think it's best if you go into starting a venture or joining a venture with eyes wide open on the level of uncertainty and change. So can you speak to that a little bit? Maybe we'll start with you, Hillary, if you have thoughts on that.
Can you, I'm not clear exactly what you're asking. Like
do you agree with this idea that things change really quickly in startups and you have to have a certain level of comfort with uncertainty, and maybe how have you managed that, or how do you manage that chaos that comes along, not being able to predict? One of the questions we had come through the Q&A was, where do you see your business in 5 years? And it's like, I don't imagine any of you are going to have an answer to that, because everything is so unpredictable. So I think I just more looking for your thoughts on that concept. Do you agree? How do you deal with it?
I see. Yes, I would 100% agree with that. I feel like it just becomes your new normal in a sense. Like, I don't remember what it's like just going to work and working on the same problem like you do in an academic setting. You kind of just get used to making your to-do list and, okay, these are all the things that need to get done this week, and I'm just gonna start ticking them off. And they're completely different directions a lot of the time, because you can't build a business with just doing the product or, just doing the marketing. Like, you have to have all these different components, and oftentimes you're not going to have a team. Like with our company, we don't even currently have someone to do the sales and marketing. We're just gearing up. Okay, what do we need to do before we want to launch our product? And we're, again, making a to-do list of things that Matthew and I are going to have to do until we can afford to hire someone to take on the marketing role. So you really just kind of get used to doing what you need to do in order to move your product forward. And it really doesn't feel to me anyways like it's a scattered. Pardon?
Yeah. Chaotic, like it doesn't feel chaotic. You eat an elephant one small bite at a time. So I tend to look at how much needs to get done, and then I'll start to get, I guess you could call it anxiety or whatever, over all the stuff that needs to happen. And then you always just have to remind yourself, hey, what am I doing right now? Do that task. That'll move us forward a little bit. And then,
yes. Well, we're almost out of time. Any last thoughts from you on this one, Matt Anderson-Barron?
Yeah, I definitely agree with you, Ashlyn. It's very chaotic sometimes. As a founder, you end up, wearing many hats, and so you just need to be able to be flexible with that. But I think bringing it back to Chris, like, he's a great example, because he's kind of like that, where he's just a doer, and he'll do anything within the company. Like, there was one day where he went right from a customer conversation where he was trying to land a big contract, and then he went in the lab and he was cutting plastic with a hot knife and gluing things together. Like, that's just kind of how it is. You just, when you're a scrappy startup, there's a lot of things you don't need to pay for. You just do it yourself, but maybe you're not the best at doing it, and you just figure it out. It's a balance between, precision and then duct tape and screwdrivers and just figuring stuff out. And it's fun. I love it. It's definitely not for everyone though. You need to have a tolerance for a bit of chaos, for sure.
Well, if that sounds like fun to you, stay tuned. I'm going to pass it off to Miriam for some closing remarks, but thank you so much to the three of you for humoring me on all these kind of tricky questions and exploring your deepest, darkest feelings around starting your own ventures. This was a lot of fun for me. So thank you. And to you, Miriam.
My pleasure. Awesome.
Great
thanks for having us.
conversation. Thank you, our panelists. Thank you, Ashley. That was a really dynamic conversation. And finally, thank you everyone who joined us live today for this session. One of our speakers from this session, Hilary Sui, will be hosting coffee chat on March 8th from 2 to 3 p.m. Spots are limited for these small group conversations, so please sign up soon through the alumni website. The next webinar in the Career Incubator series is a fireside chat with Dr. Katie Bone on May 17th. She's going to talk about a less known path on the directing clinical labs in Canada and US. Also, the Alumni Lab is currently looking for volunteers. So if you've enjoyed the program, please consider applying to be our volunteer committee advisor in our website. And thank you again for joining us tonight, and look forward to seeing you at our future session. And also, you guys gonna receive an email with all this information tomorrow and a feedback survey. And I invite you to share your thoughts about this webinar and your thoughts about ideas about future events. Thank you guys. Have a good night.